Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The blood on Sarah Chen's hands wasn't hers, which somehow made it worse. She stood in the cargo bay of a dead ship, surrounded by bodies that had stopped breathing approximately 43 minutes ago. Give or take the time it took for vacuum to finish what the raiders started. Her own crew, her own people. And she'd been in the bathroom when it happened, which was either the universe's idea of mercy or its cruelest joke yet. She was leaning toward cruel joke. The emergency lights painted everything in shades of red that matched the blood too well for comfort. Sarah wiped her hands on her flight suit, which didn't help because the suit was already soaked, and stepped over Martinez's body without looking at his face. Couldn't look at his face. Martinez had 3 kids back on Station Keller. Had 3 kids. Past tense now. Everything was past tense now. Her tablet beeped, life support critical. Oxygen remaining, 4 hours, 12 minutes. The ship's AI had a terrible sense of timing. She'd always suspected it enjoyed delivering bad news a little too much, like it had been programmed by someone who thought computers should have personality, and then regretted that decision immediately, but couldn't figure out how to undo it. Sarah made her way to the bridge, boots sticking to the deck plates with each step. The ship, the Harbinger's prize, had been a decent mid-range hauler before someone decided to turn it into a coffin. Now it was listing 30 degrees to port, engines offline, communications array reduced to expensive shrapnel, and drifting through a sector of space that appeared on exactly 0 official charts because places that don't officially exist can't officially kill you. The pilot's chair held Captain Morrison, or what was left of him, after someone had introduced his chest cavity to the business end of a plasma rifle. Sarah had served under Morrison for 6 years. He'd been a bastard, but a consistent bastard, which counted for something in this line of work. He'd also been the only person on board who knew how to manually restart the core reactor, a piece of information that would have been useful approximately 44 minutes ago. She pulled him out of the chair, trying not to think about the wet sounds that accompanied the action, and let him drift in the zero gravity. The main console was a mess of warning lights and critical alerts, each one screaming for attention like a toddler who'd discovered the word why. Sarah ignored them all and pulled up the sensor logs. If she was going to die out here, she at least wanted to know who to haunt. The logs showed exactly what she expected. 3 ships, signatures matching known raider configurations, had appeared 7 hours ago. They'd been running silent, which meant they'd been tracking the Harbinger's prize for days, maybe weeks. They'd waited until the hauler was deep in unmarked space, far from help, far from witnesses, far from anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions about missing ships and dead crews. The attack had been efficient, professional. Raiders didn't usually bother with professionalism, which meant these weren't your standard opportunistic pirates looking for cargo they could fence at the next port. These were contractors. Someone had paid good money to make sure the Harbinger's prize and everyone on it stopped existing. Sarah pulled up the cargo manifest and laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound came out wrong, brittle and sharp in the dead air of the bridge. They'd been hauling mining equipment. Boring, standard, legal mining equipment, destined for some colony world that probably didn't even have a name yet. Just a designation number and a corporate sponsor. nothing worth killing for. Nothing worth this. Which meant the cargo was a lie. Someone on this ship had been carrying something else, something valuable enough to warrant execution-style murder of 17 people who'd just been trying to earn a paycheck and maybe save enough to retire somewhere that didn't smell like recycled air and desperation. The tablet beeped again. Oxygen remaining, 4 hours, 8 minutes. Time was moving faster when you had a deadline, which was either irony or just physics being accurate for once. Sarah pulled up the crew files, looking for anything unusual. Morrison. Former military, dishonorable discharge, standard stuff. Martinez. Family man, gambling debts, boring. Chen. Sarah. Engineering specialist, too many reprimands for insubordination, trust issues. That was her file. She'd written half of it herself in the incident reports. She scrolled through the rest. 12 crew members, all dead, all unremarkable. Then she reached the passengers. The Harbinger's prize had been carrying 3 passengers on this run, which was unusual because the ship wasn't set up for passenger transport, and Morrison hated dealing with people who didn't know which end of a wrench to hold. But someone had paid extra, enough extra, that Morrison had swallowed his principles and cleared out one of the storage bays. Passenger 1, Dr. James Wheeler, xenobiologist, traveling to Research Station Helios 7. Passenger 2, Lyra Kess, occupation listed as consultant, whatever that meant. Passenger 3, no name, just a designation number and a note in Morrison's handwriting that said, VIP, no questions, triple rate. Sarah stared at that entry. No name, no species, no ID signature, just a number and enough money to make Morrison stop asking questions, which took a considerable amount of money because the man's natural state was suspicious paranoia wrapped in financial opportunism. She pulled up the security footage from the storage bay. The video was corrupted naturally because nothing on this ship worked properly even before people started dying. But she caught glimpses. A figure, humanoid, small, moving with careful deliberation. The footage cut out. When it resumed, the figure was gone, and Dr. Wheeler was lying on the deck with a hole in his head. This was getting interesting in the way that ancient curses and terminal diagnoses were interesting. Sarah found the passengers in Bay 3, or what remained of them. Dr. Wheeler had already made his appearance in the security footage, posthumously starring in his own murder. Lyra Kess was slumped against a cargo container, eyes open, staring at nothing with the kind of intensity that suggested she'd seen something unfortunate in her final moments. The third passenger, the VIP with no name, was missing entirely, which was either very good news or spectacularly bad news, depending on whether they were alive and hiding or alive and actively making things worse. The bay had been torn apart, containers opened, contents scattered, someone looking for something specific. Sarah recognized desperation when she saw it. Methodical searching looked different, organized, calm. This was frantic. This was someone running out of time and patience simultaneously. Her tablet announced oxygen remaining at 3 hours, 57 minutes, because the universe believed in maintaining pressure, even when everything else had gone to hell. Sarah ignored it and started searching the bay herself. If someone had been desperate enough to murder a ship full of people and trash a cargo bay, whatever they'd been looking for was worth finding, or worth using as leverage, or worth understanding before she died out here, with nothing but critical alerts and corpses for company. She found it behind a false panel in Container 7. Not the container itself. Those were just mining equipment, like the manifest claimed, boring and legal, and exactly what they appeared to be. But someone had welded a compartment into the back wall. Small, shielded, the kind of modification that cost serious money and suggested serious paranoia. The compartment was open, empty. Whatever had been inside was gone. Sarah sat back on her heels and considered her options. Option 1, try to fix the ship, restart life support, call for help, hope someone friendly arrived before the oxygen ran out. Probability of success, embarrassingly low. Option 2, accept death with dignity, whatever that meant. Probability of making her feel better about dying, 0. Option 3, find the missing passenger, figure out what they'd stolen, and possibly use that information to not die. Probability of success, still embarrassingly low, but at least it involved doing something other than waiting. She chose option 3. Spite was an excellent motivator. The ship's internal sensors were barely functional, but they registered one life sign besides her own. Lower deck, near the escape pods. Sarah made her way through corridors that had become obstacle courses of floating debris and occasional body parts. The artificial gravity had failed in sections, which made navigation interesting in the way that active minefields were interesting. She found the missing passenger in the pod bay and immediately understood why they hadn't been listed by name. The figure was maybe 4 feet tall, covered in dark scales that shifted color in the emergency lighting, with 4 arms and a face that featured too many eyes, arranged in a pattern that made Sarah's depth perception malfunction. Definitely not human. Possibly not anything she'd encountered before, and she'd been shipping through known space for 15 years. The passenger was working on one of the escape pods with 2 hands, while the other 2 held what looked like a data core, small, glowing faintly blue, expensive enough that Sarah's engineering background immediately calculated its worth at somewhere between a small moon and a medium-sized planet. The passenger noticed her and froze. They stared at each other. Sarah's hand drifted to the plasma pistol on her hip, the one she'd taken from Martinez's body, because borrowing from the dead wasn't stealing when everyone was already past caring. The passenger's scales shifted to a pale gray that might have been fear or might have been indigestion. Hard to tell with species she'd never met. Sarah spoke first. "You killed my crew." The passenger's voice was multiple tones layered together, like a chorus trying to harmonize and failing. "No, the raiders killed your crew. I was attempting to prevent that outcome. I failed." "You failed loud enough to get 17 people killed." 16. "You're alive." Sarah couldn't argue with the math. "What's on the data core?" The passenger's scales flickered through several colors before settling on dark purple. Information that powerful people want to remain hidden. Information that other powerful people want to expose. Information that will get anyone carrying it killed, which you may have noticed is currently happening. "Yeah, I picked up on that. Why are you stealing it?" "I'm not stealing it. It belongs to me. I created it." The passenger held up the core. "My name is Vec. I'm a data analyst for the consortium. Was a data analyst. Past tense. I discovered something I shouldn't have. Tried to report it through proper channels. Proper channels tried to make me stop existing. So I took my research and ran." Sarah processed this. The consortium was the largest corporate entity in known space, controlling everything from shipping lanes to terraforming operations to the coffee machines on Station Keller. Crossing them was generally considered a bad life choice, ranking somewhere between juggling live grenades and arguing with black holes about physics. What did you find? Vec's eyes, all 6 of them, focused on Sarah with uncomfortable intensity. Proof that the consortium has been systematically eliminating colony worlds, not raiding them, not taxing them into poverty, eliminating them, entire populations, 17 worlds in the past decade, over 4 million people. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. 4 million. She couldn't process it, couldn't fit it into her brain alongside the running tally of oxygen depletion and dead crewmates and the general unfairness of existence. Why? Resources. The colonies were on planets with rare mineral deposits. The consortium wanted those deposits. The colonists refused to relocate. So the consortium made them not exist anymore. Blamed it on raider attacks, pirate activity, colony mismanagement. No one investigated too closely, because the consortium owns the people who would do the investigating. Sarah leaned against the wall, suddenly tired. 17 worlds, 4 million people. And she'd been hauling cargo for the same consortium for 6 years, helping them move equipment and supplies, part of the machine that ground people into profit margins. You have proof of this, real proof. Vec held up the data core. Shipping manifests, communication logs, orders signed by consortium executives. Everything needed to prove what they've done. Everything needed to destroy them. And you were trying to get this to someone who could actually do something with it. Yes, there's a journalist on Station Keller. Independent, honest, foolish enough to publish something like this. I was 12 hours from delivering it when the raiders found us. Sarah laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound echoed wrong in the empty pod bay. So, you're telling me I'm going to die in deep space because you wanted to expose corporate genocide and happened to book passage on my ship? Technically, you're going to die because the consortium sent raiders to kill me, and your ship was collateral damage. But yes, that's accurate. The tablet beeped. Oxygen remaining. 3 hours, 31 minutes. Sarah stared at it, then at Vec, then at the escape pod the small alien had been working on. Can you fly that thing? I've programmed the navigation, but there's a problem. Of course there is. The pod only has life support for one person, one human-sized person. My species requires different atmospheric composition. I've been modifying it, but the conversion will take 4 hours minimum. Sarah did the math. 3 hours, 31 minutes, minus 4 hours equals very dead. So one of us can escape, and the other suffocates here. Fantastic. I love my options. Vec's scales shifted to something that might have been sympathy. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I didn't want this. Any of this. Sarah looked at the data core, glowing blue in Vec's hands. 4 million people. 17 worlds. And one extremely inconvenient piece of evidence that could maybe prevent it from happening again. She thought about Martinez's 3 kids, Morrison's consistent bastardry, the rest of her crew, unremarkable people who died unremarkable deaths for someone else's secrets. She made a decision that was either heroic or stupid, and in her experience, those 2 things occupied the same space more often than not. Sarah pulled the plasma pistol from her hip and pointed it at Vec, who immediately shifted to a color that definitely meant fear, bright yellow with streaks of white. Give me the data core. Vec's forearms clutched the device tighter. You're going to take it and leave me here to die. No, I'm going to put it in the escape pod, program it to reach Station Keller, and send it without either of us. Then we're both going to die here with the satisfaction of knowing we screwed over the people who killed my crew. Vec stared at her with all 6 eyes. That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. Yeah, I get that a lot. Data core. Now. Vec didn't move. The pod won't make it. The consortium has ships in this sector. They'll intercept it, destroy it, and we'll die for nothing. You got a better idea? Yes, you take the pod. I give you the data core. You deliver it to the journalist on Station Keller. You live. You expose what the consortium has done. 4 million people get justice. Sarah lowered the gun slightly. And you die here alone. I was already going to die here. My people don't fear death the way yours do. We view it as a transition, a merging with the collective consciousness of our species. It's considered an honor to die for a cause greater than oneself. Vec's scales flickered through a rainbow of colors. I'm lying. I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of those 4 million people dying for nothing. Sarah looked at the small alien. 4 arms, 6 eyes. Scales shifting colors with emotions she couldn't read, holding a piece of evidence worth more than both their lives combined. She thought about heroism, sacrifice, the kind of nobility that looked good in stories and felt terrible in reality. She thought about Martinez's kids, who'd never see their father again. She thought about her own file. Too many reprimands for insubordination, trust issues. She holstered the gun. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to fix life support. We're both going to live. Then we're both going to get off this ship and deliver your data core together. The life support is beyond repair. Your chief engineer tried to fix it before the raiders killed him. I saw the diagnostic logs. My chief engineer was competent. I'm better. Sarah wasn't sure if that was true, but confidence was half of engineering, and spite was the other half. How much time do I have? 3 hours, 26 minutes. Plenty of time. It wasn't plenty of time. It wasn't even adequate time. But Sarah had spent 6 years keeping the Harbinger's prize running on duct tape and optimism, and she wasn't about to let something as inconvenient as imminent death stop her now. She made her way to engineering, Vec following behind, scales cycling through colors that might have been hope or might have been nausea. The engineering bay looked like someone had decided to redecorate using explosive decompression as a design philosophy. The main life support console was slag. The backup console was missing entirely, probably floating somewhere in space, along with Chief Engineer Ramos, who'd been standing next to it when the raiders breached the hull. Sarah assessed the damage with the kind of calm that came from knowing panic wouldn't help and might actually make things worse. The primary oxygen scrubbers were offline. The backup scrubbers were functioning at 30% capacity, hence the 3 hours and counting. The tertiary system, which most ships didn't have because redundancy cost money and most captains were cheap, was intact, but not connected to anything useful. She pulled up the schematics on her tablet. The tertiary scrubbers could theoretically support life for 2 people if she could reroute power from non-essential systems, bypass the damaged relays, and convince the ship's AI that life support was more important than maintaining the coffee maker on Deck 2. The coffee maker was currently drawing more power than seemed reasonable for a device that produced liquid disappointment, but that was a problem she could solve. Vec watched her work, scales shifting to curious green. You actually think you can fix this? I think I can jury-rig something that won't immediately kill us. Whether it works long enough to matter is a different question. Sarah started pulling panels, exposing wiring that sparked in ways that suggested the manufacturer's safety specifications were more guidelines than rules. Tell me about the journalist on Station Keller. Her name is Rebecca Holt. She runs an independent news service. Small operation, but she has a reputation for accuracy. More importantly, she has a reputation for not backing down when powerful people tell her to. So she's either very brave or very stupid. Both, probably. Most truly brave people are. Vec moved closer, watching Sarah's hands work. Can I help? You know anything about human life support systems? No, but I have 4 hands. That's double the normal amount. Sarah couldn't argue with that logic. She handed Vec a plasma torch. Hold this. When I tell you, cut through that support beam. Not before. Cutting before will cause an electrical feedback that will stop our hearts. Well, my heart. I don't know your anatomy. I have 3 hearts. Redundancy is important to my species. Show-offs. Sarah pulled herself into the access tunnel, squeezing past conduits that were never meant to be accessed by someone larger than a particularly ambitious child. The ship's designers had apparently believed that engineering work should be performed exclusively by contortionists or people with no regard for their skeletal structure. She found the tertiary scrubber interface buried behind 17 layers of other systems, because of course it was. The relay connections were corroded. The power couplings were mismatched. The whole setup looked like it had been installed by someone who'd learned engineering from a manual written in a language they didn't speak. But it was there, and it was mostly intact, and mostly intact was sometimes good enough. Sarah started rerouting connections, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Engineering was like surgery, except the patient was a machine, and mistakes killed you instead of malpractice boards. She bypassed the damaged sections, created new power pathways, and liberally applied the kind of creative solutions that made proper engineers weep. Vec called from outside the access tunnel. Your oxygen level just dropped to 3 hours, 11 minutes. Thank you for that extremely helpful information. I thought you should know. I already know. The tablet tells me every 4 minutes, like it's personally invested in my anxiety levels. Sarah finished one connection and started the next. Her shoulders ached. Her hands were cramping. She was definitely going to have bruises in places that shouldn't have bruises. Tell me more about these colony worlds, the ones the consortium eliminated. Vec was quiet for a moment. Why? Because if I'm going to die trying to expose this, I'd like to know who I'm dying for. The first one was New Harmony, agricultural colony, population 47,000. They'd been there for 30 years, 3 generations. The consortium claimed raider attack. No survivors. I found shipping manifests showing consortium military vessels in the system the day it happened. Vec's voice went soft, multiple tones blending into something that sounded like grief. There were children there, schools, families. They had a festival every spring to celebrate the first harvest. I saw videos. They looked happy. Sarah's hands stilled on the wiring. 47,000 people, children, festivals, lives that had ended because someone decided profit mattered more than existence. Keep talking, Vec listed them. 17 worlds, populations ranging from 12,000 to 500,000. Each one eliminated with clinical efficiency. Each one blamed on pirates, raiders, colony failures. Each one covered up with paperwork and official statements and the kind of bureaucratic language that made atrocities sound like accounting errors. Sarah listened while she worked, reconnecting power systems, bypassing safety protocols, creating a life support solution that would either save them or kill them slightly faster than suffocation would. The names of the colonies blurred together, but the numbers didn't. 4,300,712 people. Vec had the exact count, had probably memorized every name, every face, every life that had been converted into mineral rights and profit margins. The tertiary scrubbers came online with a sound that was half wheeze, half death rattle, entirely unconvincing. Sarah emerged from the access tunnel covered in grease and blood from where she'd scraped her knuckles, raw, against unforgiving metal. The diagnostic panel showed oxygen levels stabilizing, which was either accurate or the panel was lying to make her feel better before she died. 50-50 odds. Vec's scales had gone bright orange, which Sarah was learning meant excitement, or possibly imminent combustion. It's working. The oxygen concentration is increasing. Don't celebrate yet. This is a temporary fix held together by hope and violation of engineering principles. We've got maybe 48 hours before the whole system cascades into failure. Sarah wiped her hands on her already ruined flight suit. But 48 hours is longer than 3, so I'm calling it a win. 48 hours is enough to reach Station Keller, if we can get the engines online. Sarah laughed, the sound bitter and tired. The engines are slag. The raiders knew what they were doing. They hit the reactor housing first, crippled propulsion, then took their time with the crew. Professional work. Someone paid them well. The escape pod then. We modify it for 2 occupants, accept reduced life support capacity, reach the station before the air runs out. The pod has a maximum range of 0.6 astronomical units. Station Keller is 4.3 AU from our current position. We'd die with the station in visual range, which is poetic but unhelpful. Sarah pulled up the navigation charts on her tablet. We need a ship, a working ship, which means we need to find whoever attacked us and convince them to give us theirs. Vec's scales went pale gray. That's insane. Yeah, I'm getting that feedback a lot today. But unless you've got a better idea, insane is what we're working with. Vec was quiet, scales cycling through colors that suggested intense thought or intense indigestion. The raiders disabled the ship but didn't destroy it. They searched the cargo bay. That means they don't have what they came for. They came for the data core. You still have it. Exactly. Which means they're still out there, waiting to see if anyone survived, waiting to confirm the kill. Vec's 6 eyes fixed on Sarah with uncomfortable intensity. We could use that. Sarah saw where this was going and didn't like it. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to use the data core as bait. There's a difference. Not much of one from where I'm standing. Vec pulled the data core from a pouch Sarah hadn't noticed before, holding it up to the emergency lighting. The blue glow pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and cold. This is what they want. This is what they killed 17 people to prevent from reaching Station Keller. We make them think they can take it. We lure them close. Then we take their ship instead. Sarah stared at the small alien, 4 arms, 6 eyes, scales the color of old fear. You understand that plan has approximately 17 ways to get us both killed? I counted 23. But the alternative is waiting here for life support to fail, or for the raiders to come back and finish what they started. At least this way we're choosing our death instead of accepting theirs. Sarah couldn't argue with that logic, mainly because it was her kind of logic. The stubborn variety that got people killed, but occasionally got them out of impossible situations first. Fine, we'll do it your way, but I'm driving. They spent the next hour preparing, which mostly involved Sarah cannibalizing parts from systems that were already dead to create systems that might not be. She rigged a transmitter from the remains of the communication array, barely functional, but capable of broadcasting a distress signal. The kind of signal that would look desperate and genuine because it was desperate and genuine. Vec programmed the message. Standard distress protocol. Ship disabled. Crew dead. 1 survivor. Requesting immediate assistance. The coordinates were accurate. The desperation was real. The part where they didn't mention the survivor was a 4-foot-tall alien carrying evidence of corporate genocide was a lie of omission, which was still a lie, but felt more tactical. Sarah armed herself with everything she could find. Martinez's plasma pistol, Ramos's rifle, a maintenance torch that could double as a weapon if she got creative and didn't mind probable self-immolation. She strapped a breaching charge to her belt, the kind used for emergency hull repairs, the kind that could also be used to create new doors in places that didn't previously have doors. Vec watched her preparations with scales that had gone dark blue. You've done this before. Combat. 6 years military before I went civilian. Saw action on the fringe wars. Learned how to kill people efficiently and how to feel terrible about it afterwards. Sarah checked the rifle's charge. What about you? Your people warriors? No, we're analysts, researchers. We solve problems with information, not violence. I've never killed anyone. Vec's voice went quiet. Never wanted to. Probably gonna have to change that in the next few hours. I know. Vec pulled something from another hidden pouch. A device that looked like a mixture between a data pad and a weapon. Organic curves and sharp angles combined in ways that hurt Sarah's eyes to look at directly. This is a neural disruptor. My people use it for scientific study. Temporarily interrupts electrical signals in biological systems. Non-lethal, but extremely painful. Sarah looked at the device, then at Vec. You brought a science weapon to a gunfight. I brought what I have. Will it help? Depends on whether the raiders value not being in agonizing pain over getting paid. In my experience, mercenaries have varying opinions on that trade-off. Sarah finished her preparations and moved to the bridge. Let's send our invitation and see who shows up to the party. The distress signal went out, broadcasting into the void, a tiny scream in the massive silence of space. Sarah watched the scanner, waiting. 1 hour passed. 2. The oxygen counter on her tablet ticked down with mechanical indifference. 46 hours remaining. 45 hours, 57 minutes. Time moved different when you were waiting to be killed or rescued, and the line between those two outcomes was thinner than most people wanted to admit. Vec sat in the co-pilot's chair, scales shifting through colors that suggested anxiety. What if they don't come? They'll come. We have what they want, and they're professionals. Professionals finish the job. Sarah kept her eyes on the scanner. Question is whether they come careful or confident. The scanner pinged. Single contact, approach vector matching radar configuration, moving at standard intercept speed. Not rushing, not cautious, professional work. Sarah felt something settle in her chest. The old combat calm that came from knowing the waiting was over, and the dying might begin. Vec's scales went white. They're here. Yeah, now comes the fun part. Sarah pulled up the internal security systems, what remained of them. She'd rigged proximity sensors in the corridors, improvised explosives in the airlocks. Every trick she'd learned during 6 years of military service, and 6 more of keeping broken ships running against their will. Remember the plan? Hide in the cargo bay. Wait for them to board. Use the neural disruptor when you give the signal. Try not to die. Perfect. You're a natural. Sarah handed Vec a communicator, short range, jury-rigged from spare parts. Stay on this channel. When I say move, you move. When I say hide, you hide. When I say run, you run fast and don't look back. Vec took the communicator with 2 hands while the other 2 clutched the data core and the neural disruptor. Sarah, if this doesn't work, if we don't make it, then we don't make it, but we'll make them work for it. Sarah checked her weapons one last time. Go, get into position. And Vec, thanks for not being boring. Dying for corporate genocide exposure is at least more interesting than dying because the life support failed. Vec's scales flickered through a dozen colors before settling on something that might have been gratitude or might have been resignation. You're a strange human, Sarah Chen. Yeah, I get that a lot. Sarah watched the small alien disappear into the corridor, 4 arms moving with careful purpose, scales already shifting to match the shadows. Then she turned back to the scanner and watched death approach at standard intercept speed, professional and inevitable, and exactly what she'd asked for. The raider ship matched velocity with the Harbinger's prize. Airlocks connected with a sound like metal kissing metal, intimate and final. Sarah counted heartbeats, her own pulse steady despite circumstances that suggested panic might be appropriate. The airlocks cycled. Boots on deck plates, voices calling clear in professional cadence. Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that came from spite and desperation, and the certain knowledge that if she was going to die today, she wasn't going to die alone. 3 raiders entered the bridge with the kind of confidence that came from never expecting resistance. Sarah shot the first one in the face before he finished scanning the room, which was rude but effective. The second one got his weapon up before she put 2 rounds through his chest. The third was faster, managed to fire, missed, didn't get a second chance. 3 bodies on the deck in approximately 4 seconds. Sarah's hands didn't shake, couldn't afford to shake. The communicator crackled. Vec's voice, multiple tones layered with panic. I heard gunfire. 3 down. Unknown number remaining on their ship. Stay hidden. Sarah moved to the bodies, checking for anything useful. Weapons, ammunition, a data pad with what looked like mission parameters. She pocketed all of it and positioned herself behind the captain's chair. Good cover. Clear sight lines to both entrances. The kind of position you took when you expected more company and wanted them to regret visiting. More boots in the corridor, heavier this time. Someone called out, voice professional and annoyed. Cade, Reeves, Thorne. Report. Sarah waited. Silence was its own kind of answer. Bridge team is non-responsive. Proceed with caution. We have active hostiles. That was bad news. Active hostiles meant they'd stop being casual and start being professional. And Sarah had already used up her advantage of surprise. She pulled one of the improvised explosives from her belt, armed it, tossed it into the corridor. The explosion was smaller than she'd hoped and louder than she'd expected, which was typical for devices assembled from spare parts and optimism. Screaming. Someone had been close enough to the blast to regret it. Sarah used the confusion to relocate, moving through the maintenance shaft she'd opened earlier. The raiders would expect her to hold the bridge. She'd give them the bridge and take something else instead. She emerged in the corridor behind them. 4 raiders, all focused on the bridge entrance, all presenting excellent targets. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. The combat detachment that made killing easier and living with it harder. She opened fire. 2 down before they turned. The 3rd took a round through the shoulder and went down screaming. The 4th got behind cover and returned fire with the kind of accuracy that suggested actual training. Plasma rounds burned past Sarah's head, close enough that she smelled ozone and burnt hair. She dropped behind a cargo container and assessed the situation. 1 raider remaining between her and the airlock. 1 wounded raider bleeding on the deck. Unknown number still on the raider ship. Her ammunition was finite. Her luck was probably running out. Standard military situation, really. The communicator crackled again. "Sarah, there are 2 more moving through the lower deck. They're heading toward the cargo bay. Can you hide?" "Already hiding. They're searching systematically. They'll find me in approximately 3 minutes. Sarah did the math. 3 minutes to clear 1 raider, reach the lower deck, and prevent Vec from being discovered. The math didn't work. The math never worked. She'd have to make it work anyway. She pulled the breaching charge from her belt, set it for proximity detonation, rolled it down the corridor toward the raider's position. The explosion, when it came, was everything she'd hoped for, violent and comprehensive, and probably structural damage that would make the ship even less spaceworthy. But the raider stopped shooting, which was the important part. Sarah moved through the smoke, rifle ready, found the raider in pieces that used to be a person, and decided not to examine too closely. The wounded one was still alive, clutching his shoulder, eyes wide with pain and the dawning realization that this contract had gone very wrong. She knelt beside him, pressed the rifle barrel against his forehead. "How many on your ship?" "Go to hell." "Already there. How many?" The raider spat blood. "2, pilot and captain. You'll never take them. Captain Vross has been doing this for 20 years. Good for Captain Vross. He's about to have a bad day." Sarah stood, considered shooting the wounded raider, decided against it. Waste of ammunition. He wasn't going anywhere with that shoulder. She moved toward the lower deck, boots quiet on deck plates, rifle ready. The communicator whispered, "They're close. 30 seconds. Sarah ran. The lower deck was a maze of storage compartments and maintenance access, the kind of space that was never meant for combat, but often ended up hosting it anyway. She heard voices ahead, calm and professional, 2 raiders searching with practiced efficiency. She didn't have 30 seconds. She had maybe 15. Sarah pulled the neural disruptor from her belt, the device Vec had given her, organic curves and sharp angles. No idea how to use it properly. She pointed it at the nearest raider and pressed what looked like a trigger. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The raider collapsed like his nervous system had been unplugged, convulsing on the deck. sounds coming from his throat that didn't sound remotely human. The second raider spun toward Sarah, weapon rising too slow. She shot him 3 times, center mass. He went down hard. The first raider was still convulsing. Sarah stood over him, watching. The neural disruptor had done exactly what Vec claimed. Interrupted electrical signals, non-lethal, but agonizing. The raider's eyes rolled back in his head. Foam appeared at his mouth. After 30 seconds, he went still, breathing but unconscious. Sarah felt sick. Shooting someone was clean. Quick. This was torture dressed up as science. She put the neural disruptor on the deck and stepped away from it. Vec, clear. You can come out. A storage panel opened. Vec emerged, scales pale gray, all 6 eyes fixed on the unconscious raider. The disruptor worked. Yeah, it worked great. Never give me that thing again. I told you it was painful. You didn't tell me it was that. Sarah picked up the raider's weapon, checked the charge. How many left on their ship? 2. The pilot and captain, according to their communication. Then we're going shopping for a new ship. Sarah moved toward the airlock, Vec following behind. They crossed from the Harbinger's prize to the raider vessel through the connected airlocks, from death to hopefully less death. The raider ship was smaller, meaner, built for speed and violence rather than cargo capacity. Military surplus, probably. The kind of vessel that didn't appear on official registries and changed names more often than most people changed clothes. The cockpit was empty. The pilot and captain were somewhere else. Sarah found them in the aft compartment, reviewing tactical displays, probably wondering why their team had stopped reporting. The captain was a woman, tall, scarred, the kind of face that had seen violence and decided to make a career of it. The pilot was younger, nervous, hand drifting toward a sidearm. Sarah shot the pilot first because nervous people did stupid things. The captain moved fast, faster than Sarah expected, drawing her weapon while diving behind cover. Plasma rounds burned past Sarah's head. She returned fire, keeping the captain pinned while maneuvering for a better angle. You killed my crew. The captain's voice was calm, professional, like they were discussing quarterly reports instead of murder. That's expensive. They don't grow on trees. You killed mine first. Fair's fair. Nothing fair about it. We got paid. You didn't. That's the difference between us. Sarah moved left, trying to flank. Who paid you? Consortium. Standard contract. Eliminate the ship, recover the data core, no witnesses. Easy money. The captain fired twice, forcing Sarah back behind cover. Except, now you've made it complicated. Yeah, I'm good at that. Sarah pulled her last improvised explosive, armed it, threw it blind. The explosion rocked the compartment, smoke and fire and screaming metal. Sarah moved through it, rifle ready, found the captain on the deck, bleeding from a dozen shrapnel wounds. The captain looked up at her, blood on her lips, smile somehow still intact. You're military, I can tell. What unit? 3rd Colonial Marines. Fringe Wars. Good unit. I fought against them twice. Lost both times. The captain coughed blood. You're going to take my ship. That's the plan. It won't matter. Consortium knows about the data core. They'll send more ships, more crews. They'll keep sending them until you're dead. The captain's eyes were fading, but her voice stayed strong. You can't win this. Too big, too powerful. Sarah knelt beside her. Maybe, but I'm going to try anyway. Why? You don't even know those people. Those colonies. What do you care? Sarah thought about Martinez's 3 kids. Morrison's consistent bastardry. 17 crew members who died for someone else's secrets. She thought about 4 million people converted into profit margins. Because someone should care. Because if nobody tries, then people like you win by default. The captain laughed, the sound wet and broken. Idealism. That's cute. That'll get you killed. Probably. But at least I'll die for something that matters. The captain's eyes went distant. Her breathing stopped. Sarah stood, checked the pilot. Also dead. She was alone on a stolen ship, surrounded by corpses and consequences. The communicator crackled. Sarah, did you find them? Found them. Ship is ours. Get up here. We're leaving. Vec appeared in the doorway, scales cycling through colors, all 6 eyes taking in the bodies. You killed them all. They were trying to kill us. Seemed like appropriate response. Sarah moved to the cockpit, started running through pre-flight diagnostics. The ship was functional, fueled, ready to fly. Can you navigate? I can read star charts. Whether that qualifies as navigation is debatable. Good enough. Plot a course to Station Keller. Fastest route. We're on a deadline. Vec slid into the co-pilot seat. 4 hands moving across controls designed for 2. The consortium will be tracking this ship. Let them track it. By the time they figure out we're aboard, we'll be docking at Station Keller. Sarah fired the engines. The ship trembled, pulled away from the Harbinger's prize, left it drifting in the dark. Your journalist friend, Rebecca Holt. She'll actually publish this? She will. She's published things that got her threatened, assaulted, nearly killed twice. She keeps publishing anyway. Sounds like my kind of person. Sarah set the course, watched the stars shift as the ship accelerated. Behind them, the Harbinger's prize grew smaller, a tomb drifting through space, 17 people who'd never reach home. When we get there, when we deliver this data core, what happens to you? Vec's scales went dark purple. The consortium will want me dead. Your authorities might want me detained for questioning. I'll probably spend the rest of my life hiding, or imprisoned, or both. That's a terrible outcome. Better than 4 million more people dying on colony worlds while the consortium covers it up. Vec held up the data core, blue light pulsing steady. This is worth it. They're worth it. Sarah looked at the small alien. 4 arms, 6 eyes. Scales the color of old determination. Yeah, they are. Station Keller looked like someone had taken industrial architecture and beaten it with an ugly stick until it gave up on aesthetics entirely. Gray metal, harsh angles, the kind of place that prioritized function over form, and succeeded at being depressing. Sarah had docked here hundreds of times, over 6 years, hauling cargo for the consortium, part of the machine she was now actively trying to destroy. The irony wasn't lost on her. The docking procedures were standard. Automated systems checking credentials, port authority requesting cargo manifests, the usual bureaucratic dance that kept space commerce running. Sarah fed them false information, ship registration stolen from the Raider database, cargo listed as mining equipment. Same lie the Harbinger's prize had used. Lies worked until they didn't. Vec sat in the co-pilot seat, scales shifting through nervous colors. They're accepting our credentials. For now. We've got maybe 2 hours before someone notices this ship is flagged in consortium security databases as stolen. We deliver the data core, get your journalist to publish, and disappear before security decides to ask uncomfortable questions. Sarah shut down the engines, started post-flight procedures. You know where Holt operates? Level 7. Independent news office near the commercial district. Small operation. She runs it alone, mostly. Alone is good. Fewer people to complicate things. Sarah stood, checked her weapons. The plasma pistol was mostly depleted. The rifle had maybe 20 rounds remaining. Not enough for a sustained firefight, but enough to make problems for anyone who caused problems first. Let's move. They left the ship through the main airlock, joining the flow of station traffic. Keller Station held maybe 50,000 permanent residents, and twice that in transient population. People moving through on business, or pleasure, or because they had nowhere else to go. Sarah had always found stations depressing, artificial environments, where everything was recycled, including the hope. Vec drew attention immediately. 4 arms, 6 eyes, scales that shifted colors. Definitely not human, and not any of the common species that frequented the station. People stared, some with curiosity, some with hostility, most with the practiced indifference of station dwellers who'd seen everything and weren't impressed anymore. They took the transit tube to level 7, standing among workers heading to shift changes and merchants hauling goods, and the general flow of humanity and adjacent species trying to survive another day. Sarah kept her hand near her weapon. Vec kept the data core hidden in a pouch, 4 arms positioned to grab it and run if necessary. Level 7 was quieter. Commercial district meant offices and small businesses, the kind of places that operated on thin margins and thinner hope. Rebecca Holt's office was sandwiched between a shipping broker and something that advertised legal services with enthusiasm that suggested illegal activities. The door was locked. Sarah knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. Vec's scales went pale. She should be here. She works constantly, never closes. Sarah tried the door handle, locked but not well. Standard commercial security, designed to keep out casual theft but nothing serious. She pulled a multi-tool from her belt, worked the lock mechanism. 30 seconds later, the door opened. The office was small. 1 desk, 2 chairs, walls covered in news clippings, and investigative notes. A coffee maker that looked older than Sarah. Filing cabinets that had seen better. Decades and blood. Fresh blood on the floor, trailing from the desk toward the back room. Sarah drew her weapon. Stay behind me. They found Rebecca Holt in the back room, slumped against the wall, holding a towel against her side. Blood soaked through it, dark and concerning. She looked up when they entered, eyes sharp despite obvious pain. Early 40s, dark hair going gray, the kind of face that had spent years asking questions people didn't want to answer. You're not consortium. Her voice was steady despite circumstances. Good. I'm tired of them. Sarah knelt beside her, assessed the wound. Plasma burn, clean through the side, cauterized by heat but still bleeding. Painful, but probably not fatal if treated soon. Who did this? 2 men. Professional. Asked about sources, informants, anyone who might have information about colony operations. I told them to go to hell. They expressed disagreement violently. Holt's eyes found Vec. You're the analyst, the one who disappeared 3 weeks ago. Everyone thought the consortium disappeared you permanently. Vec held up the data core. They tried. They failed. I have everything. Shipping manifests, communication logs, executive orders, proof of 17 colony eliminations, 4 million people. Holt's expression shifted. Pain gave way to something fiercer. You can prove it? Really prove it? Every world, every death, Every executive who signed off on genocide for quarterly profits. Vec moved closer. Can you publish it? Can I? Holt laughed, the sound sharp and pained. I've been trying to investigate this for 2 years, getting stonewalled, threatened, nearly killed twice before today. You're handing me the biggest story in colonial history. She looked at the data core like it was salvation wrapped in blue light. Of course I'll publish it. But first, you need to get me to a medical facility before I bleed out and your evidence dies with me. Sarah made a decision. Vec, stay with her. Apply pressure to the wound. Keep her conscious. I'll get medical supplies. Where are you going? There's a clinic 2 levels down. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Sarah moved toward the door, paused. Holt, the 2 men who did this, they still around? Probably. Consortium doesn't leave loose ends. They'll come back to finish the job once they report in. Holt's eyes met Sarah's. You should run. Take Vec and the data core and disappear. I'm already dead anyway. You're not dead yet. And I'm tired of running. Sarah checked her weapon. 10 minutes. Don't die. The clinic was where she remembered it. Run by a Tyrellian doctor who asked few questions and charged reasonable rates for medical care that didn't appear on official records. Sarah had used his services twice during her years shipping for the consortium. Both times after incidents, she'd preferred to keep quiet. The doctor looked up when she entered, 3 eyes blinking in sequence. Sarah Chen, you're not bleeding this time. Progress. Need supplies, plasma burn treatment, bandages, coagulant, whatever you've got for emergency wound care. Someone you know injured? Someone who doesn't deserve to die today. Sarah pulled credits from her pocket. How much? The doctor named a price. Sarah paid double. There's extra if you forget I was here. I have excellent memory problems. The doctor assembled supplies, packed them in a medical kit. Whoever was burned, they should come here for proper treatment. Not an option. Complications. There are always complications with you, Sarah Chen. Try to stay alive. Dead customers don't pay repeat business. Sarah took the kit and left, moving through station traffic with purpose. She'd been gone 7 minutes, 3 minutes to get back. Everything was going according to plan, which meant something would go wrong immediately because plans didn't survive contact with reality. She was right. She reached level 7 and saw them. 2 men in dark suits, professional demeanor, standing outside Holt's office. One was talking into a communicator. The other was trying the door handle. Consortium security. Had to be. Sarah assessed her options. 2 armed professionals. She had maybe 20 rounds and the element of surprise. The math was bad, but not impossible. She'd survived worse odds. Barely. Multiple times. The barely part was important. She moved closer, keeping to the crowd. Just another station resident going about business. The men were focused on the door. One pulled out something that looked like an override key. They'd be inside in seconds. Sarah drew her weapon and shot the lock mechanism. The door sparked, fused shut. Both men spun toward her, hands reaching for weapons. She shot the first one in the leg, the second in the shoulder. Non-lethal because killing consortium security on a station would bring attention she couldn't afford. Both men went down. Sarah ran past them, kicked away their weapons, kept moving. Alarms would be sounding. Security would respond. She had maybe 2 minutes before this entire level became hostile. She circled around, used the maintenance access she'd learned about years ago, the kind of knowledge you picked up when you spent enough time on a station. emerged in the corridor behind Holt's office, found the back entrance, the one that didn't have consortium security bleeding in front of it. Vec looked up when she entered, scales bright yellow. "I heard gunfire. Complications. We need to move." Sarah handed the medical kit to Vec. "Patch her up. We've got 90 seconds before this place becomes very dangerous." Vec worked fast, 4 hands moving with surprising efficiency. Applied coagulant to the wound, wrapped bandages, injected something from the kit that made Holt gasp. That should stabilize her. She needs real medical attention soon. She'll get it after we're somewhere else. Sarah helped Holt to her feet. The journalist was pale but steady. "Can you walk?" "Can I walk? I've been shot 3 times in my career. This is barely top 5 worst injuries." Holt grabbed the data core from Vec with shaking hands. "We need to get this published. Now, before the consortium kills all of us and buries the evidence." "Where?" "Your office is compromised." "I have backups. Equipment stashed in 3 locations across the station. Old journalist habit. Never trust single points of failure." Holt moved toward the door, stumbled. Sarah caught her. "Level 3. Storage Unit 472. Everything we need is there." They left through the back entrance, moving through maintenance corridors that most station residents didn't know existed. Sarah led, weapon ready. Vec supported Holt, 4 arms proving useful for keeping a wounded journalist mobile. Behind them, sirens. Security responding to gunfire. Lockdown protocols engaging. Level 3 was industrial storage, rows of identical units holding the accumulated possessions of people who'd run out of space in their apartments or run out of apartment entirely. Unit 472 was near the back, nondescript, nothing to distinguish it from hundreds of others. Holt entered a code. The door opened. Inside was a complete mobile journalism setup. Computers, servers, satellite uplinks, enough equipment to run a small news operation from anywhere. "I've been preparing for this for 2 years, ever since I started investigating the colony disappearances." She collapsed into a chair, still pale, still bleeding through the bandages, but alive and determined. "Give me the data core." Vec handed it over. Holt plugged it into the main system. Data flooded across multiple screens. Shipping manifests, kill orders, executive communications, 4 million names converted into files, and evidence and proof that couldn't be denied or buried. Holt's hands moved across the keyboard despite trembling. "This is everything. This is more than everything. This will destroy them." "How long to publish?" Sarah watched the door, expecting consortium security any moment. 30 minutes to verify data integrity, write the story, upload to distributed networks. Once it's out there, it's permanent. The consortium can't stop it. Holt looked up, eyes fierce. "But they'll try to stop us first." Sarah checked her weapon. 20 rounds remaining. Maybe. "Then we hold them off for 30 minutes. They had 15 minutes of peace before everything went wrong. Sarah spent it checking sight lines, identifying cover positions, creating a defensive perimeter from storage units and shipping containers. Not a fortress, but better than standing in the open, waiting to die. Vec helped, despite having no combat training, moving containers with 4 arms that proved surprisingly strong for someone so small. Holt worked at the computer, hands flying across the keyboard, occasionally stopping to press the bandage against her wound when blood seeped through. The screens filled with text, images, evidence arranged into a story that would end careers and possibly topple governments. Sarah watched the journalist work and felt something like hope, which was dangerous, because hope got you killed when you should have been running. The communicator on Sarah's belt crackled. Station security frequency. Easy to intercept if you knew how. All units, level 3, storage section. Armed suspects, extremely dangerous. Consortium has authorized lethal force. Sarah's stomach dropped. Lethal force authorization meant this wasn't standard security anymore. Consortium had enough influence on Keller Station to override normal protocols, convert a criminal matter into an execution. They'd be sending everything they had. Vec, how much time does Holt need? Vec checked the screens. 18 minutes. She's working as fast as possible. That's 17 minutes longer than we probably have. Sarah positioned herself behind a cargo container that offered clear view of the main corridor. When they come, stay down. Don't be heroic. Heroism is how civilians die in crossfires. What about you? I'm not being heroic. I'm being stubborn. There's a difference. Sarah checked her rifle one more time. 20 rounds. Had to make them count. Every shot needed to matter, because missing meant dying, and dying meant Holt didn't get her 18 minutes. They came in force. 12 security officers in full tactical gear, moving with professional precision, the kind that came from training and experience. Sarah recognized the formation. Military surplus tactics. These weren't station security playing at combat. These were former soldiers earning consortium money. Sarah let them get close. 50 meters, 40, 30. When the first one passed her position, she fired, dropped him with a shot through an armor gap at the neck. The rest scattered, taking cover, returning fire with the kind of volume that suggested ammunition wasn't a concern for them. Plasma rounds burned through the air, hitting containers, creating molten metal and toxic smoke. Sarah moved between positions, firing when she had shots, relocating before return fire found her. Guerrilla tactics. Make them work for every meter. Cost them time and people and confidence. She dropped 2 more. The rest adapted, stopped advancing, established a perimeter. Smart. Professional. They'd learned she was dangerous and decided to solve the problem methodically instead of rushing and dying. Bad news for Sarah because methodical meant time, and time was what Holt needed. The tactical commander called out, voice amplified. Sarah Chen, former sergeant, 3rd Colonial Marines. We know who you are. We know you're protecting the journalist and the consortium analyst. Surrender now, and you'll live. Continue resistance and everyone in that storage unit dies. Sarah didn't respond. Talking was admitting position and giving them targeting information. She moved left, found an angle, shot another security officer through the shoulder. Not lethal, but he went down screaming, and his squad had to pull him back to safety. 4 down, 8 remaining. Her ammunition counter showed 12 rounds. Vec's voice through the communicator, quiet and scared. They're flanking. 2 officers moving through the parallel corridor. Sarah swore creatively. Flanking meant they'd mapped the area, knew the layout, were executing actual tactics instead of just throwing bodies at the problem. She moved toward the secondary entrance, found the 2 flankers advancing with weapons ready. She shot the first one center mass. His armor absorbed most of the impact, but he went down. The second returned fire, forcing Sarah behind cover. Plasma rounds hit the container next to her head, metal heating to dangerous temperatures. She counted 3 seconds, rolled out, fired twice. Both rounds hit. The officer dropped. 6 remaining in the main group. 2 down in the flanking attempt. Sarah's ammunition counter showed 8 rounds. The math was getting worse. Halt! How much longer? The journalist's voice came back strained. 12 minutes. Data verification is taking longer than expected. If I skip it, the consortium will claim the evidence is fabricated. If you don't skip it, we'll all be dead, and the evidence won't matter. It matters. It has to matter. 12 minutes, Sarah. Give me 12 minutes. Sarah reloaded. Her last magazine checked her position. The security forces had stopped advancing. They were waiting for something. Reinforcements, probably. Or heavier weapons. Or orders from Consortium Command about how much collateral damage was acceptable on a civilian station. The tactical commander called out again. Chen, you're former military. You know how this ends. You're outnumbered, outgunned, trapped. We can wait you out. Starve you out. Or we can breach that storage unit with explosives and kill everyone inside. Your choice. Sarah considered her options. All of them were bad. Running meant abandoning Holt and Vec. Surrendering meant execution, maybe quick if she was lucky. Fighting meant dying slightly slower, but dying nonetheless. She'd faced bad options before during the Fringe Wars. Usually she found a fourth option that was even worse, but occasionally worked. She pulled the communicator, switched to station-wide emergency frequency. This is Sarah Chen, currently pinned down in Level 3 storage by Consortium security forces. I'm protecting a journalist who has evidence of corporate genocide. 17 colony worlds eliminated. 4 million people murdered for mineral rights. The Consortium is trying to kill us before the evidence goes public. If anyone's listening, if anyone cares about justice, we're in storage section 472, and we're running out of time. Silence. Then static. Then a voice Sarah didn't recognize, gruff and old. This is Captain Morris, Independent Hauler Celestial Dawn. I lost my sister on New Harmony Colony 5 years ago. Consortium claimed raider attack. If you've got proof they lied, I'm coming. Another voice. Female. Young. This is Kara Voss, Dock Worker Union. We've been hearing rumors about colony disappearances for years. We're mobilizing. Hold on. More voices. Dozen. Scores. Station residents who'd lost people to unexplained colony failures. Workers who'd questioned consortium operations and been threatened into silence. Independent merchants tired of corporate control. Not an army, but something else. Witnesses. People who cared. People who were tired of being afraid. The tactical commander's voice lost some confidence. Chen, call off your mob. This is consortium business. Station security matter. Civilians interfering will be charged. Sarah smiled. Not a nice smile. Sounds like the civilians disagree with your assessment. The security forces pulled back slightly, reorganizing. They'd expected to contain one target in an isolated location. They hadn't expected station-wide attention. Hadn't expected consequences. The consortium operated best in darkness, secrecy, places where witnesses didn't exist or didn't matter. Vec appeared beside Sarah, neural disruptor in 2 hands, data core clutched in the others. I can help fight. You can help by staying alive and protecting that core. If we die and that survives, Holt can still publish. Sarah checked her ammunition. 6 rounds. How much longer? 8 minutes. She's uploading to distributed networks now. Once it reaches critical propagation, the consortium can't stop it. 8 minutes. Sarah had faced longer odds in worse situations. Had survived things that should have killed her through combination of skill, luck, and spite. mostly spite. She positioned herself at the defensive perimeter and waited. The security forces tried one more push. 4 officers, coordinated advance, suppressing fire from the others. Professional execution. Sarah dropped the first with a headshot through armor gap. The second took 2 rounds center mass. The third reached cover. The fourth threw a grenade. Sarah saw it coming, grabbed Vec, dove behind a heavy container. The explosion was loud and close, shrapnel pinging off metal, ringing in her ears. She came up firing, dropped the third officer. The fourth retreated. 3 rounds remaining. The tactical commander's voice came again, different now, uncertain. Final warning, Chen. Surrender, or we breach. Breach, and you'll have to explain to station administration why you used explosives in civilian storage. Explain it to the crowd gathering outside. Explain it to everyone watching. Sarah's voice carried. Your move, Commander. Kill us and become the story. Or wait and let the evidence destroy your employers. Silence. Long and tense. Sarah counted heartbeats. 80, 90, 100. Then Holt's voice, weak but triumphant. It's done. Published. Distributed across 17 independent networks. Consortium can't stop it now. Everyone knows. Sarah felt something release in her chest. Relief. Victory. The strange lightness that came from completing a mission against impossible odds. You heard her, Commander. The evidence is public. Killing us won't change that. You've lost. The tactical commander didn't respond. The security forces held position, but didn't advance. Standoff. Sarah could live with standoff. The crowd outside grew. Station residents, dock workers, merchants, people who'd heard the broadcast and came to witness. Not fighters, but witnesses, which was sometimes more powerful. Consortium couldn't massacre civilians on a station this size without consequences that even corporate influence couldn't contain. Hours passed. Sarah's hands stopped shaking. Adrenaline faded into exhaustion. Vec stayed close, scales cycling through colors that suggested relief mixed with disbelief. Holt worked at her computer, despite blood loss and pain, monitoring the story's spread, watching it propagate across networks, unstoppable. Station administration arrived eventually. Actual authorities, not consortium security. They negotiated. Consortium forces withdrew under protest. Sarah, Vec, and Holt were taken into protective custody, which was bureaucracy for, we don't know what to do with you, but killing you would look bad now. In the holding area, clean and relatively comfortable, Sarah finally allowed herself to collapse. Vec sat beside her, 4 arms wrapped around knees, scales dark blue. We did it. We actually did it. Yeah, we did. Sarah looked at her hands, still shaking slightly. Combat aftermath. 4 million people got justice. That counts for something. It counts for everything. Holt's voice from the medical bed where they'd finally forced her to rest. The story's spreading. Major networks picking it up. Consortium stock dropping. Investigations launching. Executives resigning. It's working. Sarah closed her eyes. She'd lost her ship, her crew, nearly died multiple times, killed more people in 2 days than she had in 6 years of civilian life. But somewhere, maybe, Martinez's kids would know their father hadn't died for nothing. The Harbinger's prize crew would be remembered as victims of something that mattered. What happens now? Vec asked quietly. Now we testify, give statements, help investigators, spend months or years dealing with legal proceedings. Sarah opened her eyes. Then maybe we figure out what comes after, what normal looks like. I don't think I know what normal is anymore. Yeah, Me neither. Sarah looked at the small alien who'd started this entire mess by refusing to let genocide stay hidden. But we'll figure it out together. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of the memorial on New Harmony's restored colony site. The consortium had been forced to fund reconstruction as part of the settlement, returning the worlds they'd stolen to the families they'd destroyed. 47,000 names carved into black stone, each one a person who'd been converted into profit margins, and then into evidence, and finally into memory. The settlement had been massive. Criminal charges against 37 consortium executives. Corporate restructuring that shattered the company into smaller entities with actual oversight. Reparations to surviving family members that would take decades to distribute. Justice, imperfect and incomplete, but more than Sarah had expected when she'd been dying on the Harbinger's Prize with 3 hours of oxygen remaining. Vex stood beside her, scales shifting through somber purples and grays. The small alien had become something of a celebrity. The whistleblower who'd exposed the biggest corporate crime in colonial history. Universities wanted Vec for speaking engagements. Advocacy groups wanted consulting work. The galactic community wanted a symbol of courage against corruption. Vec had refused everything. I don't want to be a symbol. I want those 4 million people to matter more than I do. Sarah understood that sentiment. She'd spent 6 months giving testimony, reliving the attack on her ship, describing the bodies of her crew in clinical detail. For investigators who took notes and looked sympathetic and moved on to the next question. She'd been offered jobs, security consulting positions, speaking fees. She'd refused them all. Rebecca Holt approached from the memorial entrance, walking with only slight limp now. The plasma burn had healed but left scars, physical and otherwise. She'd won 17 journalism awards for the consortium expose. Her news service had exploded in size, credibility, influence. She could have retired wealthy and respected. She'd kept working instead. Too many stories still buried. Too many powerful people still hiding crimes. Someone has to keep digging. The three of them stood together in silence, watching families place flowers at the memorial, touching names, crying for losses that could never be recovered. Sarah thought about her crew. Martinez with his 3 kids, Morrison with his consistent bastardry. 17 people who died as collateral damage in someone else's war. "I've been thinking," Vex said quietly, "about what comes next. What we do now that the story is told and the justice is happening." "And?" Sarah kept her eyes on the memorial. "I don't want to go back to analysis work. Don't want to spend my life in databases finding patterns. I want to do something that matters." Holt smiled, tired but real. "Everything matters if you do it right. But I understand the sentiment. I'm starting a foundation." Vec's scales shifted to determined orange. "For colony protection, advocacy, investigation of disappearances, making sure what happened to these worlds never happens again. I have the settlement money from the consortium, enough to fund it for decades." Sarah looked at the small alien with new respect. "That's ambitious, also probably dangerous. Powerful people don't like being investigated." "I know. That's why I need help. People who know how to handle danger, how to fight when necessary, how to stay alive when someone wants you dead." Vec's 6 eyes fixed on Sarah with uncomfortable intensity. "I'm offering you a job. Director of Security. Good pay. Terrible hours. Significant probability of violent death. Sarah laughed despite herself. You make it sound appealing. I'm trying honesty. I've found people respond better to truth than marketing. What about me? Holt crossed her arms. I've got a news service to run. Can't just abandon it to chase corporate criminals full-time. I'm not asking you to abandon it. I'm asking you to partner. The Foundation investigates. You publish what we find. We create a system where exposure happens before the body count gets too high. Vec pulled out a tablet, displayed organizational charts and funding projections. I've been planning this for 3 months. It's viable. It's necessary. It's dangerous. But it's worth doing. Sarah studied the proposal. Colony protection, advocacy work, investigation and exposure of corporate crimes before they became genocides. It was ambitious, probably impossible, definitely dangerous. The kind of work that got people killed but occasionally changed things that needed changing. She thought about Martinez's kids, growing up without a father, because the consortium had valued profit over people. Thought about 4 million names on 17 memorials across known space. Thought about the next colony that might face elimination if nobody was watching. I'm in, Sarah said. Someone needs to keep you alive long enough to make a difference. Might as well be me. Holt nodded slowly. The news service partners with the Foundation. We publish what you find, create public pressure, make it harder for corporations to hide crimes. She extended her hand. I'm in too. Vec's scales went bright yellow, happy colors, all 6 eyes wide. Thank you, both of you. I know this isn't easy. I know it's asking a lot. Easy is boring. Sarah shook Vec's hand, surprised at how warm it was despite the cool skin. Besides, I'm unemployed and have a stolen raidership. Might as well use it for something productive. They spent the rest of the day at the memorial, watching families grieve, taking notes on what reconstruction looked like, understanding what they were fighting to protect. As evening approached, the 3 of them walked back toward the transit station, unlikely allies bound by shared trauma and stubborn determination. Vec walked between them, scales cycling through content blues. Can I ask you something, Sarah? Depends on the question. That day on the Harbinger's prize. When you decided to help me instead of taking the escape pod. Why? You could have lived, could have walked away. Why risk everything for a stranger? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching the alien sunset paint the sky in colors that Earth never produced. My first combat deployment during the Fringe Wars. I was 22 years old. Thought I knew everything. We were doing evacuation support, getting civilians off a colony, before the fighting reached them. There was a kid, maybe 8 years old, separated from his family. Scared. Alone. She stopped walking, the memory sharp despite years. My commanding officer said we didn't have time. Had to leave. I disobeyed orders, went back for the kid, found him hiding in a collapsed building, got him to the transport, saved his life. You were punished for disobeying? Vec asked. Yeah. Written up. Lost promotion opportunity. My CO told me I'd made a mistake, chosen one life over mission efficiency. He was probably right from a tactical standpoint. Sarah started walking again, but 20 years later, I still remember that kid's face when he saw his family again. Worth every consequence. That's why you helped me, because leaving people behind isn't who you are. That's why I helped you, because someone should care. Because if nobody tries to do the right thing, then the people who do wrong things win by default. Sarah looked at Vec. Your foundation. It's about caring when it's inconvenient, fighting when it's dangerous, refusing to accept that profit matters more than people. Vec's scales shifted to colors Sarah had never seen before, deep purples and golds mixed together. My species believes that purpose finds people who are ready to accept it. I think purpose found us, all three of us. Holt snorted. Purpose or bad luck? Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Maybe they're the same thing, Sarah said. Maybe bad luck is just purpose with terrible timing. They reached the transit station as full dark settled over New Harmony. The rebuilt colony glowed with artificial lights, people returning to homes that had been ash and memory 6 months ago. Life continuing despite everything. Resilience born from necessity and spite. Sarah's communicator chirped. Message from Station Keller authorities. 3 more suspicious colony disappearances reported in the outer sectors. Investigations stalled. Families asking questions. Consortium subsidiaries operating in the areas. She showed the message to Vec and Holt. Looks like the Foundation has its first assignment. Vec's scales went determined orange again. How soon can we leave? Ships fueled and ready. We can be off-planet in 2 hours. Sarah checked her weapon out of habit. Still there. Still charged. Old habits from old wars that never really ended. Fair warning. This probably won't go smoothly. Nothing worthwhile ever does, Holt said. That's what makes it matter. They boarded the transport back to the spaceport. 3 unlikely allies with a stolen ship and a dangerous mission, and the kind of stubborn determination that changed things slowly and painfully and necessarily. Sarah looked out the window at New Harmony's memorial, lights illuminating carved names in the darkness. 47,000 people who died for corporate profit. 4 million across 17 worlds. The next colony wouldn't know they were in danger. Until it was too late, unless someone intervened, unless someone cared enough to fight. Sarah had spent 6 years hauling cargo for the consortium, part of the machine that ground people into quarterly reports. She'd lost her crew, her ship, nearly lost her life. But somewhere in the blood and violence and impossible choices, she'd found something worth fighting for. Purpose found people who were ready to accept it. Maybe Vec was right about that. Or maybe Sarah had always been ready and just needed the right catastrophe to figure it out. The transport lifted off, carrying them toward the spaceport and the stolen raider ship and whatever came next. Behind them, New Harmony's lights grew smaller, a colony restored, a memorial maintained, 47,000 names that would never be forgotten. Sarah closed her eyes, felt exhaustion and determination fighting for dominance in her chest. Tomorrow, they'd start investigating. Tomorrow, they'd risk their lives again. Tomorrow, someone would probably try to kill them for asking uncomfortable questions. But tonight, for just a few hours, they could rest knowing they'd made a difference, knowing that 4 million people had gotten justice, knowing that the next colony had a chance because 3 stubborn people refused to look away from inconvenient truths. Some people said humans were weak, that they broke easily, gave up when things got hard, chose comfort over courage. Maybe that was true for some. But Sarah had learned something during her years in the military, and her years hauling cargo, and her days dying on a broken ship in deep space. Humans were stupidly, stubbornly, magnificently persistent when something mattered enough. They'd fight impossible odds. They'd sacrifice everything. They'd stand between danger and innocent people just because it was the right thing to do. And sometimes, against all probability and common sense, they'd win. The transport docked, they collected their gear, boarded the ship that had once belonged to raiders and now belonged to people who'd stolen it for justice. Sarah settled into the pilot's seat, ran through pre-flight checks, felt the familiar weight of responsibility and purpose. Vec sat in the co-pilot position, 4 hands moving across controls. Holt took the communications station, already monitoring news feeds for patterns and anomalies. "Ready?" Sarah asked. "Ready," Vec confirmed. "Ready," Holt echoed. Sarah fired the engines. The ship lifted, pulled away from New Harmony, accelerated toward the stars and the next colony and the next fight and whatever came after. Behind them, memorials glowed in the darkness. Ahead, people who needed help they didn't know was coming. 3 people in a stolen ship against corporate power and entrenched corruption and the general unfairness of existence. Bad odds. Terrible probability of success. The kind of mission that got people killed. But someone had to try. Someone had to care. Someone had to stand up and say that people mattered more than profit, that justice mattered more than convenience, that doing the right thing mattered even when it was hard. Might as well be them. The ship jumped to faster than light travel, leaving New Harmony behind, carrying Sarah Chen, Vec, and Rebecca Holt toward whatever came next. 3 unlikely heroes. 3 stubborn people who refused to accept that the universe punished kindness. Sometimes the best families were the ones you chose yourself. Sometimes the best purposes were the ones that found you when you were ready. Sometimes spite and determination and basic human decency were enough to change everything. The end. Some people say humans are the weakest species in the galaxy. Maybe that's true. But we're the only ones stupid enough to fight impossible odds for strangers we'll never meet. And you know what? Sometimes that's exactly what changes everything.